Estás entrando en Crónicas de la Oscuridad. En este reino nocturno, las sombras escriben historias prohibidas, relatos tan perturbadores que desafían toda lógica. Cada crónica es un viaje sin retorno hacia lo más profundo y oscuro del alma humana, donde los miedos más íntimos cobran vida y se materializan en terrores indescriptibles. El silencio aquí no es aliado, sino cómplice, susurrando secretos que ningún mortal debería escuchar jamás. Permanece atento, pues las historias que escucharás quedarán tatuadas en tu memoria y acecharán tus sueños durante mucho tiempo después. The siren song of solitude lured me, Elias utterly unprepared for what awaited within the bones of that secluded country house. My cramped city flat, a cacophony of neighborly noise, had driven me forth seeking sanctuary, weeks of untainted air, a space to unburden my thoughts. It seemed elemental, a quiet haven, a hearth promising warmth against the encroaching chill, a worn sofa for repose. I arrived under a pale Thursday sky, tires crunching on the gravel path, a flicker of anticipation kindling within me for the promised peace. My agenda was simple: unwind, conjure a few hearty meals, perhaps lose myself in a book before succumbing to sleep beside the fire's glow. But the first frost-kissed night fractured that idyllic vision entirely. Stepping across the threshold near midday, I let my valise drop, the thud echoing slightly. An immediate survey commenced. The main room sprawled, dominated by a vast stone hearth reaching towards the timbered ceiling. Those heavy beams groaned softly under my weight. Adjacent, the kitchen proved compact yet equipped. Refrigerator humming faintly, stove awaiting use, a sink beneath a lone window framing a dense cluster of trees. A faint aroma of dust and dormant linens permeated the bedroom. The house wore an air of long vacancy. Pulling open a closet door to hang my shirts revealed silken threads of spiderwork clinging to the corners. I swatted them away, consciously suppressing thoughts of nocturnal scuttling. After depositing my few belongings, a 15-minute drive brought me to the nearest village provision store. Canned soups, sturdy bread, bottled water, the staples. Nearby, a weathered stand offered firewood. The vendor, observing my purchase, remarked how the nights out here possessed a deeper bite than city folk anticipated, a cold that belied gentler days. That evening, the hearth demanded its first tribute. I nested logs upon the grate, tucked kindling beneath, and struck a match. Flame leaped eagerly, a soft percussion of crackles filling the room. Cocooned in a thick blanket on the sofa, I felt an initial wave of tranquility wash over me. Mesmerized by the firelight painting flickering chiaroscuro on the walls. My head rested against the cushions. I drew a slow, deep breath. The city's frantic pulse, the looming deadlines, the habitual anxieties, they receded, momentarily banished. Perhaps 20 minutes dissolved before a peculiarity snagged my attention. The flames writhed, shifting unnaturally. Leaning closer, eyes narrowed, I perceived, or imagined I perceived, the fleeting impression of a human face sculpted within the inferno. Indistinct, yet the contour suggested eyes, the curve of cheeks, a chin etched in light. My immediate rationale, a chance configuration of the logs, an optical illusion born of shadow play. I rubbed my eyes, blinked hard. It vanished as swiftly as it had materialized. A coldness, unrelated to the night air, traced its path down my arms. My throat felt suddenly parched. Coincidence? I insisted internally. Firelight's trickery. Still, a profound unease settled. I rose, fetched a glass from the kitchen, gulped water. Returning to the hearth, I seized the iron poker, nudging the logs, disrupting their arrangement. hoping to shatter the pattern. The visage did not reappear. Eventually, the fire waned to glowing embers. I added another log, seeking sustained warmth, then curled onto the sofa and drifted into a shallow doze. Shivering violently, I woke near 2 in the morning. The fire was a ghost of itself, mere embers pulsing faintly in the hearth's deep recess. My breath plumed white in the frigid air. Pushing myself up, rubbing warmth back into my arms, I carefully rebuilt the pyre. Tinder caught from a struck match. Nascent flames climbed the fresh wood. I stepped back watching, my heart thudding with an unfamiliar insistence. A part of me was waiting, dreading, expecting the face's return. Initially, the fire blazed with comforting normalcy, spitting sparks. Then, as my gaze remained fixed, the shape coalesced once more. Sharper this time, distinct. Its lips seemed to move, silently articulating words I couldn't hear. A tightness seized my chest. My breathing grew rapid, shallow. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. I blinked repeatedly, desperately. But the face held, suspended in the flames for 5, maybe 6 seconds, before dissolving back into the chaotic dance of orange and red. I retreated, legs unsteady, stumbling back until the edge of the kitchen counter met my spine. Grabbing a nearby throw pillow, I clutched it to my chest, feeling the frantic drumming against my ribs. A heavy, acrid odor wafted from the chimney, damp soot and stale ash, burning the nostrils. Smoke, thicker than before, curled downwards, tendrils creeping along the ceiling beams, almost seeming to trace patterns in the gloom. I averted my gaze, refusing to seek further shapes. My thoughts raced, grappling with the possibility of hallucination, stress-induced phantoms. I scrubbed at my face, trying to ground myself. Sleep in the living room felt impossible now. I fled to the bedroom, shut the door firmly, and burrowed under the covers, still fully clothed. My skin felt clammy, breath ragged. Sleep was elusive, punctuated by stark images of the fiery visage whenever I closed my eyes. Exhaustion eventually claimed me. Morning found me hollowed out, a knot tightening in my stomach, head pounding from fractured rest. After dressing and forcing down dry bread, I threw open every window, inviting the crisp air to purge the lingering smokiness. A faint black residue stained the corners of the hearth. Methodically, I cleaned out the ashes. The repetitive action a frail attempt to regain control, to convince myself normalcy could be restored. My hands trembled slightly as I worked. Just fatigue, I told myself. The day was spent largely outdoors, exploring the overgrown grounds, following a faint trail winding behind the house, kicking through fallen leaves beneath ancient oaks, the sun warm on my back. I achieved a semblance of calm for a few precious hours. But as evening descended, so did the temperature, and my resolve wavered. Back in the living room, I stood before the fireplace, a silent battle raging within. A trick of light, an overactive imagination. With a resigned sigh, I laid the logs. My fingers felt stiff, clumsy with tension, but the need for warmth and perhaps a morbid curiosity compelled me to light the fire. I settled onto the sofa, vigilant. Flames surged, crackled. For a time, normalcy reigned. Then, it returned. The face. It lingered longer now, its eyes appearing to shift, scanning the room with unnerving focus. The mouth opened. A silent gasp or plea, accompanied only by the sharp hiss and pop of burning wood. My hands balled into fists. A profound weakness invaded my legs. I gripped the sofa armrest for support. Every nerve ending felt electrified. My pulse hammered in my ears. Again, the smoke gathered near the ceiling, swirling languidly along the dark beams. I backed away slowly, retreating until the kitchen counter offered its solid presence once more. My gaze remained locked on the hearth. The face seemed to track my movement. Impulsively, I snatched the fire extinguisher from beneath the sink. Aiming the nozzle at the flames, finger hovering over the trigger, I hesitated. Some rational part of me craved explanation. A blocked flue? An object lodged within. Yet instinct screamed against approaching. Then, as before, the face dissolved, melting back into the undifferentiated flicker. I stood panting by the counter, the extinguisher heavy in my trembling hands. My knuckles were white. Carefully I set it down. My mouth was sandpaper. Swallowing felt difficult. Water helped little. The air thickened with smoke and an underlying musty scent I couldn't place. Escape seemed the only option. Shrugging into my jacket, keys in hand, I fled to the car, my breath hitched, chest tight. I drove, aimless at first, until the neon glow of a roadside diner offered refuge. Perched on a stool at the counter, I ordered coffee, trying to will my racing pulse into submission. My fingers drummed a nervous rhythm. I stared intently at the laminated menu, reading descriptions without comprehension. Slowly, over lukewarm coffee and a greasy burger I barely tasted, the adrenaline ebbed. 2 hours passed in that anonymous sanctuary. Returning to the house, late and reluctant, I found the living room cold, the hearth holding only dying embers. I sat in the encroaching darkness, debating the wisdom of rekindling the fire. The house felt different now. Oppressive, the air weighted. A shiver ran through me despite my thick sweater. Leaving felt logical. Yet the thought of packing in the dead of night, the long drive back, deterred me. And beneath the fear, that sliver of perverse curiosity persisted. Would it return? One final time, I built the fire, standing close, match poised. As flames took hold, I stepped back, waiting, breath held. Minutes crawled by uneventfully. I poked at the logs, searching for any natural formation, a knot, a grain pattern that might mimic features. Nothing. All ordinary rough-barked timber. Then, inevitably, it formed, centered in the blaze, seemingly pressing outward, straining against its fiery confinement. The lips parted, cheeks drawing inward as if inhaling deeply, yet only the crackle and hiss of combustion reached my ears. Vertigo washed over me. My head throbbed. The room seemed to tilt. I forced my eyes open, refusing to look away, though my hands shook violently and my breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat trickled down my temple, cold against my skin despite the fire's proximity. The face's expression was one of profound torment. A sympathetic pressure built in my own chest, an irrational fear of being drawn into the flames. My fingers tingled. Inhaling sharply, I caught that thick, smoky odor again, intensified, mingled with the pervasive mustiness. Then I saw it. The smoke wasn't merely rising. It pooled beneath the ceiling, drifting outwards, forming sinuous coiling lines that gathered in the room's corners, creeping insidiously. My eyes stung. Each breath felt inadequate, scraped raw. Coughing, I stumbled backward towards the window, fumbled with the latch, and threw it open. Cold night air rushed in, a welcome shock. I gulped it down, vision blurring momentarily. Blinking rapidly, I spun back towards the fireplace. The face was gone. The flames danced normally. The smoke began its proper ascent up the chimney. Still trembling, I sank onto the sofa. My heartbeat echoed in the sudden quiet. Despite the open window, the room felt stagnant, thick. The soft crackle from the hearth, the subtle creak of timbers overhead, mundane sounds now imbued with menace. I remained there for an hour, maybe longer, too frightened to seek the bedroom, too exhausted to pace. Every settling noise made me flinch. My gaze kept darting towards the fireplace, anticipating. It remained empty of apparitions. The logs burned down. The heat faded. Pulling an extra blanket around myself, I slept fitfully on the sofa, window still ajar, jerking awake periodically with a gasp. Once, I thought I heard a whisper, faint and indistinct, but opening my eyes revealed only silence, save for the kitchen clock's steady tick. In the following days, I waged a futile campaign against the phenomenon. I procured a long brush from the shed and scrubbed the chimney flue, dislodging soot and debris. I called a local chimney sweep. They couldn't schedule a visit for a week. I purchased new firewood from a different supplier, hoping the source was the variable. It made no difference. Whenever the hearth was lit, the face would manifest, at least once. Each appearance seemed to last longer, the silent mouthing growing more desperate, more insistent. No sound ever escaped, only that visual, silent plea. The smoke continued its aberrant behavior, hovering, swirling, before eventually dissipating. One afternoon, gripped by a need for proof, I set my phone on a chair, aimed it at the fireplace, and recorded. Reviewing the footage yielded nothing but dancing flames and occasional bursts of light. Artifacts, perhaps, but no discernible face. It was there, plain as day when witnessed directly, yet refused digital capture, remaining stubbornly ephemeral. Night after night, exhaustion deepened. The stale, smoky air felt heavy in my lungs. Questions swirled, unanswerable. Sharing this felt impossible. Dismissal or concern for my sanity seemed the only likely responses. Yet a core of me needed to understand, to find a rational explanation that wasn't madness. The house became a cage. The smell of old smoke clung persistently to my clothes, my hair. Sleep offered no respite. I woke each morning drenched in sweat, muscles locked in tension. Trips for supplies became fraught. I scanned faces, wondering if my unease was visible, palpable. Dark circles bloomed beneath my eyes. My reflection showed a stranger perpetually frowning. I braced for escalation, for some dreadful culmination each time the face appeared. Yet it only watched, lips moving in silent anguish. It offered no violence, only its profound, unsettling sorrow. But it was enough. It wore me down, eroded my nerves. Trapped by fear and a relentless curiosity I couldn't quell, I endured for nearly 2 weeks. Then, one gray morning, the tension snapped. I gathered my few possessions, packed the car with numb efficiency, and locked the door behind me. A final glance into the living room revealed the cold, empty hearth, the heavy air. I turned away, started the engine, and drove, not looking back. The memory remains indelible. The way the face moved within the flames, the smoke's unsettling drift against the ceiling. Even now, in the sterile safety of my apartment, lighting a simple candle prompts a pause, an involuntary scan of the small flame. Nothing ever appears. Yet the sensation lingers, of being watched, of a presence just outside my perception. I sometimes dwell on that silent mouth, opening and closing, forever trying to speak. What message was trapped within the fire? I never learned, and perhaps I never truly wished to. I know only this: that house remains a place I will never revisit, and no fireplace will ever again seem merely a source of warmth, forever shadowed by the memory of those eyes staring back from the flickering light. That rasping against the window pane was no trick of the wind. I knew because the forest stood utterly inert, boughs incised against the lunar glow like ossified talons clawing at a field of stars. This sound possessed intention, an implacable insistence that swelled in the stillness. I'd sought refuge in this timbered sanctuary. This cabin nestled deep in the woods, fleeing the city's ceaseless cacophony for a measure of quietude. Now, petrified in my bed, senses straining against the profound hush, I comprehended the terrifying vulnerability of silence, how swiftly it could be fractured. My arrival merely yesterday afternoon had felt auspicious. Sunlight, warm and thick with the resinous perfume of pines, slanted through the trees as I found the cabin. It was undeniably winsome, weathered timber radiating a rustic gravity, its broad veranda promising dawn-watched coffee rituals. The advertisement had pledged hermitage, and indeed, it was profoundly isolated. Miles lay between me and the nearest soul, leaving only the vast embrace of the woods and the sporadic commentary of birds. I'd spent the day settling in, tracing nearby footpaths, immersing myself in the pervasive tranquility. As twilight deepened, I'd ensconced myself on the sofa with a novel. The hearth's gentle crackle and the cicada's thrumming chorus, the only counterpoints to the enveloping peace. It wasn't until the cusp of sleep that the first disquieting sensation arose. A faint frisson across the nape of my neck, the undeniable perception of being observed. I dismissed it, a flicker of urban paranoia in the sylvan calm. Solitude was the point, wasn't it? Nothing lurked here. Yet now, stark awake in the profoundest dark, that feeling returned, amplified into certainty. The scratching ceased. In its place, a sound far more unnerving resonated, the distinct grinding of boots on the gravel path outside. I held my breath, attempting to quell the frantic drumming in my chest. An animal, perhaps. A foraging deer, maybe even a bear. Weren't they indigenous to these reaches? The steps paced the cabin's perimeter, measured and deliberate. They halted beneath each window, and I could almost discern the texture of strained respiration, heavy and close. My hand, trembling violently, sought my phone on the bedside table. I nearly fumbled it. Predictably, no signal bars illuminated the screen. Civilization and its invisible tethers felt worlds away. The footsteps had completed their circuit, now sounding heavily upon the front porch. Ancient floorboards groaned their protest beneath an unseen weight. Inertia was untenable. Lying here, awaiting... what? The thought remained terrifyingly incomplete. With excruciating slowness, I eased from the bed. The bare floorboards bit at my feet with cold as I navigated towards the bedroom door. It opened with a minute, protesting squeal. Moonlight, argent and transformative, flooded the main room, twisting familiar furnishings into ominous silhouettes. My throat constricted as I crept towards the front entrance. Earlier, I'd noted a baseball bat incongruously placed in the umbrella stand. Now its presence felt like providence. My fingers closed around the smooth, dense wood, its heft a fragile talisman against the unknown. Silence descended upon the porch once more, an unnerving, absolute quiet. Pressing my ear to the door, I listened intently. Nothing. Had it departed? Had the entire episode been a figment of frayed nerves? Just as relief began to bloom, I heard it. A soft thud, as if something substantial had been gently placed on the decking, followed unequivocally by the sound of the doorknob rotating, slow turn by slow turn. I recoiled, the bat instinctively raised. The door wasn't secured, lost in the deceptive serenity of the wilderness. The simple act of locking up had utterly escaped my mind. The door began its agonizingly deliberate swing inward. A sliver of night, then a widening void, revealed absence. The doorway stood agape, framing only the moonlit emptiness beyond. I remained motionless, bat poised, gaze fixed on the vacant threshold. The crickets had fallen mute. The entire forest seemed suspended in held breath. An eternity later, or perhaps mere seconds, I lowered the bat. A tentative step forward. I needed to know. I had to see. Peering out onto the porch, I found it deserted. Another step, then one more, brought me fully outside. The night air, cool against my skin, raised goose flesh along my arms. I scanned left, then right. Only shadows playing in the lunar wash. As I turned to retreat indoors, something arrested my gaze. There, at the porch's edge, barely discernible, impressions in the damp earth. Not the cloven marks of deer nor the broad pads of a bear. These were, without question, human footprints. My breath hitched. Kneeling, I studied them. They were fresh, the mud still glistening, and they were large, significantly larger than my own. My eyes followed their trail. They emerged from the tree line, ascended the steps onto the porch, and then a chill permeated my very marrow. The footprints led directly, unerringly to my bedroom window. With shaking hands, I retrieved my phone, activating its flashlight. The beam sliced the darkness, illuminating the cabin's flank. Beneath my window, more prints marred the ground. And something else. Long, gouging scratches scored deeply into the wood, precisely where the window met the sill. I staggered back, comprehension dawning cold and sharp. This was not imagination. This was happening. Escape was imperative. I fled back inside, slamming the door and finally, belatedly throwing the deadbolt. I scrambled into my room, pulling on the nearest clothes, forcing my feet into hiking boots. As my fingers closed around my car keys, the sound returned. Footsteps pounding on the porch, no longer stealthy but urgent, running. I lunged for the back door, wrenching it open and plunging into the unlit woods. Heavy breathing pursued me, twigs snapping underfoot. I ran with a desperation I hadn't known I possessed, lungs searing, unseen branches lashing my face. Directionless, propelled only by primal fear, I burst from the dense undergrowth onto the gravel track where my car waited, an argent promise under the moon. Keys fumbled in my sweat-slicked palm. Behind me, something large blundered through the brush, closing the distance with terrifying speed. The key found the lock. I threw open the door, hurled myself inside, and slammed it shut just as a hulking silhouette broke free from the trees. I jammed the key into the ignition, a silent invocation on my lips. The engine caught, roared. My foot crushed the accelerator. As the car fishtailed, spitting gravel, my rearview mirror captured a fleeting image. A tall, broad-shouldered figure standing motionless in the center of the track, watching me vanish. I didn't ease off the pedal until the blessed lights of the main highway appeared, a sight more beautiful than any sunrise. I drove relentlessly through the remaining night, not stopping until the familiar urban sprawl enveloped me. I never filed a report. The story sounded unhinged, even to myself. What proof existed beyond my own frantic testimony? Yet, sometimes on nights steeped in quiet, when the wind whispers through the city trees, the memory surfaces. The rasping at the glass, the deliberate footsteps, the watcher in the mirror. And I am forced to wonder, what if sleep had held me fast? What if I hadn't heard? What presence haunted those woods? And what precisely did it desire? That cabin remains a place I'll never revisit, but a chilling certainty resides within me. Whatever stalked the darkness that night lingers still, concealed in the forest's deep shadows, awaiting the next unsuspecting soul who lowers their guard, who forgets a simple lock, who dismisses that primal sense of being watched as mere fancy, because the monsters sometimes are undeniably real, and sometimes they leave proof in the earth. The awful certainty bloomed late. A poisonous flower unfurling in my gut the instant I grasped our trajectory was fundamentally wrong. By then, escape was a phantom limb. The truck's locks clicked shut like coffin nails. The man gripping the wheel shed his Samaritan skin, and only the immense, indifferent void of the desert yawned back from every window. It began, as these things often do, with mundane misfortune. My venerable sedan, the Nomad, finally surrendered its mechanical ghost, coughing its last on an achingly lonely ribbon of asphalt somewhere deep in New Mexico's ochre heart. Hours I'd driven, the landscape a hypnotic loop of skeletal cacti and restless tumbleweeds. Sunset bled across the heavens, a spectacular hemorrhage of crimson and violet I couldn't savor, preoccupied as I was with the totality of my predicament. The ignition offered only a pathetic whine, a death rattle. My phone predictably displayed nothing but mocking emptiness. Stranded. Then twin stars ignited in the rearview mirror, swelling into headlights. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief crashed over me. Help? Surely. Or at least passage to civilization. The approaching vehicle materialized as a pickup, grizzled and scarred by time, slowing with a rumble. A man, middle-aged, his face etched by sun and wind, offered a disarming grin through the lowered window. "Engine quit on ya?" His voice was rough-hewn, yet threaded with kindness. I affirmed his guess, sketching the situation's grim outlines. He absorbed it all with quiet patience before extending the offer. A lift to the nearest town. Hour's drive maybe, he reckoned. Get a tow truck called from there. A flicker of caution, my mother's spectral warnings about roadside Samaritans, gave me pause. But the alternative? A vigil under the chilling desert stars. Praying another soul traversed this emptiness before thirst or exposure claimed me. That would be amazing, I managed, retrieving my knapsack. Truly thank you. He called himself Silas as I settled into the passenger seat. The cab breathed dust, old leather, and the ghost of stale tobacco. A mournful country tune wept softly from the radio. We navigated the currents of small talk. My destination, a nascent career in Los Angeles. My origins, a pinprick town in Ohio he'd naturally never heard of. The people awaiting me, university friends, future roommates. He in turn painted himself a native, steeped in this arid land. Knew the desert, he claimed, like the lines on his own weathered palm. Perhaps 20 minutes slipped by before a subtle dissonance began to hum beneath the surface. Something in Silas's questioning, a certain fixity in his gaze when his eyes flicked towards me. It felt wrong. Dismissing it as paranoia, I chided myself. He was merely being neighborly. Then a detail snagged my attention, chilling the blood in my veins. We were driving east. The sun, which had been sinking directly ahead when we began, now blazed off to our left. Silas, I ventured, striving for nonchalance. I think maybe we're headed the wrong way. Wasn't the town west from where the Nomad died? Silence stretched, taut and brittle. When he finally spoke, the earlier warmth had evaporated, leaving his tone flat, metallic. No, he stated. This is the right way. My heart commenced a frantic drumming against my ribs. My hand darted to the door handle, a desperate cinematic notion of tucking and rolling, locked, child safety. Where are you taking me? The fear was naked in my voice now, pretense abandoned. A smile twisted Silas's lips, devoid of humor, sending icy tendrils down my spine. Somewhere quiet, he murmured. Somewhere we won't be bothered. Panic detonated within me. My eyes scanned the cab frantically, hunting for leverage, a weapon, anything. The truck's interior was stark, almost unnervingly tidy. No stray wrench, no forgotten tire iron. Nothing. Please, I whispered, hating the tremor that weakened the word. Just let me out. I won't say a word, I promise. He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Oh, I know you won't say a word. Nobody ever does." The implication struck with physical force. He'd done this before. How many others? How many vehicles sat abandoned like mine, their drivers swallowed by this vastness? We rolled onward in a suffocating silence, the miles spooling out into an endless, desolate ribbon. My mind scrabbled for a strategy, finding only smooth, blank walls. Trapped, hurtling deeper into an unknown wilderness with a man whose intentions were terrifyingly clear. Just as despair threatened to engulf me completely, Silas wrenched the wheel, veering off the highway onto a barely there dirt track. The truck bucked and groaned, plunging us into true wilderness, severing the last fragile thread of potential rescue. After an eternity compressed into perhaps 20 minutes, he braked. We sat in a small clearing hemmed in by dense scrub and monolithic rock formations, bathed in the eerie silver of the moon. It possessed a stark alien beauty, but I knew instinctively this wasn't a place for appreciating landscapes. "Out," Silas commanded, producing a handgun from beneath his seat. My legs turned to water as I obeyed, stumbling onto the parched earth. He followed, the gun unwavering. "Start walking." He gestured toward a narrow defile snaking between two colossal boulders. Flight screamed through my synapses, but a single glance at the surrounding emptiness choked the impulse. Run where? Even if I miraculously outpaced him, the desert itself would finish the job. So I walked, thoughts racing, desperately seeking an escape hatch from this waking nightmare. Could reason find purchase? "You don't have to do this," I pleaded, voice ragged. "Whatever you're planning, it isn't too late to turn back." He offered no reply, only a sharp prod with the gun barrel. 10 minutes stretched into an agonizing trek before a dark maw appeared in the rock face, a cave entrance. My stomach plummeted. This was it, the end point. "Inside," he grunted. I faltered, eyes darting wildly, searching for any sliver of hope. And then I saw it, a glint of moonlight on metal, half submerged in the sand near the cave mouth. A length of rebar, forgotten relic of some aborted construction. Primal instinct surged, overriding fear. I lunged, my fingers clamping around the cold, rusted steel, just as Silas registered my movement. He lunged too, but adrenaline lent me speed. I swung the rebar with every ounce of strength I possessed, connecting solidly with his extended forearm. A strangled howl tore from his throat. The gun spun away into the shadows. I didn't linger. I ran. Ran with a desperation I hadn't known I possessed, scrambling over stones, tearing through thorny bushes that ripped at my clothes and skin. Behind me, I heard him, cursing, crashing through the undergrowth. Directionless, propelled only by terror, I pushed onward. My lungs burned, legs screamed, but fear was a relentless engine. I clawed my way up a steep, scree-covered slope, loose rocks cascading beneath my feet. Cresting the rise, I saw them. Distant lights. A town? A highway? It didn't matter. It was civilization, salvation. I plunged down the opposite side, but my foot snagged a hidden root. I tumbled, cartwheeling down the incline, landing in a bruised heap at the bottom. Dazed, battered, but miraculously intact, I lay gasping for air. Then I heard it, footsteps crunching down the slope behind me. Pain lanced through my ankle, but I forced myself upright. He couldn't catch me. Not now, not this close. I limped forward, staggering towards the growing lights. Silas's ragged breathing sounded terrifyingly close behind me. Just when my body threatened complete failure, I burst from the scrub onto pavement, solid, blessed pavement. And there, like a divine intervention, a car approached. Waving frantically, I stumbled into its path. Tires shrieked as the vehicle slewed to a halt mere feet away. An older couple stared out, their expressions morphing from alarm to concern. "Please," I choked out. "Help! He's trying to kill me!" After a heartbeat's hesitation, the woman flung open the rear door. "Get in," she urged. I dove inside as Silas emerged from the darkness at the roadside. "Go!" I screamed. The driver slammed the accelerator, tires spitting gravel as we surged away, leaving Silas a shrinking silhouette against the vast, indifferent desert night. We drove straight to the nearest town's police station. The story poured out of me, a torrent of tears and fractured sentences. They found my nomad where I'd left it, and Silas's truck abandoned near the cave entrance. But Silas himself? Gone. Melted back into the arid landscape he knew so intimately. Nightmares still visit sometimes, echoing whispers of what might have been had the rebar remained hidden, had that couple not driven that road at that precise moment. Mostly, though, I reflect on the razor-thin margin separating me from becoming another statistic, another face on a missing person poster. I don't offer rides to strangers anymore. And before any long journey, my vehicle undergoes rigorous inspection. Because I learned the hard way that the most dangerous monsters don't lurk in childhood shadows. Sometimes they stand smiling by the roadside, offering salvation that leads only to the abyss. The instant the headlights resolved into a shape, a form chillingly congruent with the vehicle encasing me, the mundane dissolved. This wasn't happenstance. It was a tear in the fabric of the night, a personalized phantasm dragging itself into the tangible world, poised to fray the edges of my sanity. My fingers, skeletal white, clenched the wheel, a primal anchor against the certainty that this particular darkness would leave an indelible stain. It began as nothing more remarkable than the weary commute from the Starlight Kettle, my shift dissolving into the pre-dawn hours. 2:17 a.m. glowed accusingly from the dash as I navigated the echoing expanse of the employee lot, the neon promise of open 24 HRS shrinking into a smear of electric color in the rear view. These arteries of our sleeping town were typically veins drained of life at this hour. 100 times, perhaps more, I'd traced this path, a route etched into muscle memory. Yet, tonight felt taut. The atmosphere hummed, thick with a latent energy that prickled the skin, setting my nerves alight like faulty wiring. Perhaps 10 minutes slid by under the drone of the engine before the awareness coalesced, headlights persistently distant yet stubbornly present. Not too close, not lagging. Perfectly ordinary, I reasoned, some other soul escaping the gravity of a long day. But as my route snaked through progressively narrower, more intimate streets, the lights clung, a silent, luminous satellite. Disquiet bloomed, a cold flower in my chest. I squinted into the mirror, seeking a face, a form, anything to dispel the growing unease. But the glare behind me rendered the driver a mere void, a silhouette carved from the night. A test, then. At the junction where habit dictated a left turn homeward, I veered right. The twin beams behind me followed without hesitation. My pulse quickened, a frantic drummer against my ribs. "Stay calm, Ilara," the thought skittered. Maybe they're lost, following someone who looks like they know the way. A flimsy shield against the burgeoning conviction that this was calculated, deliberate, predatory. Another arbitrary turn, then one more. Each deviation met with perfect, immediate mimicry. Sweat slicked my palms. My breath hitched, snagging in a tightening chest. It was then, through the distorting lens of the rearview glass, that the detail emerged, crystallizing the formless dread into sharp-edged terror. The car wasn't merely similar, it was its spectral twin. The same obsidian paint, the identical curve of the chassis, the same model year. Even the small crescent-shaped indentation on the front bumper, a memento from a careless encounter with a concrete pillar last month, was reflected back at me. Impossible, I breathed, the word a fragile vapor in the car's sudden chill. My foot mashed the accelerator, seeking distance, escape. The shadow car matched the surge effortlessly. I bled off speed. It mirrored the deceleration. A looking-glass world made terrifyingly solid, pursuing me through the dark. My thoughts fractured, scrambling for purchase. A hallucination born of fatigue, a waking dream stitched from late-night anxieties, or something infinitely more alien, more hostile. My hand darted towards my phone, a desperate grasp for connection, for help, only to be met with a screen full of dead air and the mocking hiss of static. No signal. Naturally. The ensuing minutes bled into a frantic montage, fueled by adrenaline and raw panic. I drove without direction, hurling the car down unfamiliar lanes, twisting through the sleeping town in a desperate ballet to shed my pursuer. Yet, the other remained, an unblinking eye in my mirror, a constant, terrifying echo. The familiar glow of streetlights dwindled as I breached the town's periphery. Darkness pressed close, thick and suffocating. Only our twin headlight beams sliced through the oppressive black parallel blades carving the night. And then, rising from the gloom like a skeletal wreck, an old, abandoned petrol station. Its sign, bleached and peeling, whispered of forgotten commerce. Boarded windows stared like vacant eyes. In that moment, it seemed less a ruin and more a sanctuary. Instinct took over. I wrenched the wheel hard right, tires screaming protest as the car skidded onto the cracked, weed-choked tarmac. Engine silenced, lights extinguished. I folded myself down, shrinking below the window line, holding my breath until my lungs burned. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Until the crunch. Another engine sighing to a halt. Another set of tires rolling over loose gravel. My shadow had followed me into the derelict haven. Motionless, scarcely daring the expansion of my own chest, I listened. Car doors opened, clicked shut. Footsteps, hesitant at first, then gaining confidence, crunching closer on the gravel path towards my refuge. My heart hammered, a frantic prisoner against my ribs, surely loud enough to betray me. Eyes squeezed shut, a silent, desperate plea cast into the void. The footsteps ceased directly outside my door. A shadow eclipsed the faint ambient light on the driver's side window. Slowly, weighted by a dread that felt physical, I lifted my head and stared directly into my own eyes. A strangled gasp lodged in my throat. I recoiled, hitting the opposite door. The figure, the thing, standing mere inches away was undeniably, impossibly me. My dark hair, my eyes, the faint crescent scar high on my left cheekbone, souvenir of a childhood tumble. But the expression, it was a grotesque distortion, a rictus mimicking a smile that radiated pure malevolence, freezing the marrow in my bones. An eternity seemed to pass in that shared gaze. Then, with agonizing slowness, it raised a hand. A single deliberate tap resonated against the glass, sharp and loud as a pistol shot in the profound stillness. Panic detonated. My hands, slick and trembling, fumbled for the ignition, the key refusing purchase. The entity outside remained passive, watching with that horrifying, knowing smirk as the engine finally roared to life. I slammed the gear shift, tires spitting gravel, and launched the car back onto the road. I drove like something possessed, pushing the engine towards its breaking point, fleeing down the empty highway. My mind was a maelstrom, refusing to reconcile the impossible vision. Not real. It couldn't be real. Yet every fleeting, terrified glance into the rearview mirror confirmed the nightmare. My car, my ghost twin behind the wheel, pacing me with relentless precision. Time lost its moorings. How long I drove, propelled by sheer terror through a landscape smeared into streaks of darkness, I couldn't say. The fuel gauge dipped perilously low, the warning light pulsing an ominous crimson across the dashboard. Just as despair began to solidify, a flicker of hope pierced the gloom. The familiar shape of the Welcome to Oakhaven sign materializing ahead. The next town. Lights, people, potential sanctuary. I urged the car onward, whispering frantic prayers for it to hold together just a little longer. As I shot past the sign, a final compulsive check of the mirror. The road stretching back into the darkness was utterly, blessedly empty. A ragged sob escaped me. I eased my foot off the accelerator, the tension coiling in my shoulders loosening fractionally as the first streetlights of Oakhaven embraced the car. The warm glow emanating from a 24-hour diner, the Beacon Cafe, felt like the most beautiful sight imaginable. I swung into the parking lot, the engine shuddering as I killed it. For a long moment I simply sat, adrift, attempting to anchor my racing heart, to piece together the shattered fragments of the night. Eventually, summoning a reserve of courage I didn't know I possessed, I pushed the door open. The cool night air felt real, grounding. On legs that felt like borrowed stilts, I walked towards the diner's inviting light, desperate for coffee, for normalcy. My hand reached for the chrome door handle. Movement flickered in the polished surface's reflection. I spun around, my breath catching. There, parked beside my own vehicle, was its identical twin. Leaning casually against the driver's side door, wearing my face, stood my pursuer. It lifted a hand in a slow, deliberate, mocking wave, the twisted smile firmly in place. I stumbled back, colliding hard with the diner door. When I blinked, forcing my eyes to refocus, both the car and the doppelganger had vanished into the night air. I burst through the door, eliciting a startled look from the lone waitress, Maeve, polishing the counter. "Everything all right there, hon?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. My mouth opened, the frantic, unbelievable story poised to spill out. But the words died. How could I articulate the impossible? Who would ever believe such a thing? "I'm fine," I managed, the word tasting like ash. I slid onto a vinyl stool. "Just a long night. Coffee, please. Black." As Maeve moved towards the percolator, my gaze fell upon my own reflection swimming in the gleaming countertop. It was me. My face, my hair, my eyes. Yet, something felt discordant. Was that smile stretched just a fraction too wide? Was there an unfamiliar flinty glint lurking in the depths of those familiar eyes? The chilling realization dawned. The nightmare hadn't ended at the town line. Whatever had hunted me, whatever had stolen my face, remained untethered. And worse, a sliver of icy doubt lodged itself deep within me. Perhaps a fragment of it, a seed of that wrongness, had found its way inside. Sipping the scalding coffee, my hands still betraying me with their tremor, I knew with stark certainty returning home was no longer an option. Because somewhere in the darkness, wearing my life like a stolen coat and driving my car, was a perfect imitation bent on erasure. And a terrifying premonition whispered that it wouldn't rest until it had claimed its prize entirely. My bedroom, once envisioned as a sanctuary of solitude after Ronan, somehow began to breathe menace. Those initial nights unfurled in quietude, a welcome expanse after shared confines. Then, darkness descended differently one evening. Beneath the familiar weight of the duvet, The equilibrium shifted. A distinct depression formed beside me on the mattress, an invisible companion settling in. The very air grew viscous. My pulse hammered against my ribs, each inhalation a strained effort. Eyes snapping open revealed only shadow play, yet the undeniable presence remained, a contour of void beside me. A paralysis seized my limbs when I attempted to rise. Trapped, staring into the oppressive dark, the line between waking and nightmare blurred. Then came the sound. Faint, rhythmic exhalations, followed by susurrations too low, too intimate to decipher. Motionless, voiceless, a knot of pure tension, I could only lie rigid, praying for the dawn. Sunrise painted the walls, yet brought no true relief. I peeled myself from the sheets, limbs stiff, insisting it was merely a phantasm of sleep, a bizarre dream echo. Throughout the workday's sterile hum, the sensation lingered, a phantom weight on the bed beside me. Imagination, I chided myself. A trick of shifting weight. But the imprint remained, a psychic bruise I couldn't ignore. A strangeness too profound, too intimate to confess. Entering the bedroom the following night felt like wading into heavier water. A small lamp cast a lonely circle of amber in the corner, a fragile ward against the encroaching quiet. Hours bled away, my gaze fixed on the textured ceiling, sleep a skittish bird refusing to land. Then, oblivion beckoned, and just as consciousness softened, it returned. A palpable weight bore down near my right thigh, the mattress groaning softly under the unseen burden. I jackknifed upright, heart leaping. The lamp still glowed, illuminating the familiar topography of my duvet, yet revealing no intruder. Only a coldness, sharp and localized, traced a path across my skin, less a draft than an icy tendril. Scrambling from the bed, my feet hit the floor with a clumsy thud, pulse thundering, a sheen of cold sweat blooming on my face. Reality felt thin, stretched taut. My eyes raked the room, windows sealed tight, closet doors impassive. Nothing amiss, nothing tangible, yet the air thrummed with an invisible scrutiny. I paced, touching walls, seeking a rational source. A draft, a creak. Futile. The conviction of being observed clung like static. Returning to bed was an act of will, but sleep remained elusive, arriving only in fractured moments, shattered by the slightest creak or shift in the shadows. Dawn arrived through gritty eyes. A dull ache throbbed behind my temples. "You look drained, Eliza," a colleague observed. "Bad night," I offered, the vast understatement tasting like ash. The truth felt radioactive, too bizarre to articulate without inviting disbelief, perhaps pity. Lunch became a blur of phone scrolling, a futile attempt to silence the internal monologue, anticipating the inevitable return to that room, that presence. That night, I clung to the mundane glow of the television, postponing the inevitable until sheer exhaustion blurred the screen. Well past 2, I crept into the bedroom, navigating by the phone's cold light, collapsing onto the mattress without ceremony, begging for swift oblivion. Later, awareness surfaced reluctantly, drawn by a sound. Soft, consistent respiration. Close. Frighteningly close, perhaps inches from my ear. I froze, a captive audience to my own hammering heart. Rolling onto my back, I fumbled for the phone, its screen painting a fleeting, inadequate circle of light. Nothing visible. Yet the breathing persisted, measured, almost deliberate, the sound of someone trying not to be heard. Inch by cautious inch, I retreated, spine finding the unyielding chill of the wall. Then a new texture entered the soundscape. Hushed, sibilant whispers, unintelligible fragments like prayers spoken in reverse. A tremor started deep within me. Escape felt impossible. My limbs turned to lead. Somehow, summoning a final surge of adrenaline, I lurched upright, snatched pillow and duvet, and fled to the dubious safety of the living room couch. There, huddled and vigilant, I spent the remaining hours scrutinizing the hallway's dark mouth, anticipating movement. Daylight brought a desperate resolve. I conducted a meticulous search, vents, floorboards, the bed's very frame, seeking any anomaly, any physical explanation. The house yielded no secrets. That night I introduced music, a small speaker humming beside the bed, hoping to drown out the silence and its insidious occupants. For a time, it seemed to work, lulling me towards sleep. Then a sharp tug. My eyes flew open. The duvet had been pulled down several inches. Empty air surrounded me. As I watched, paralyzed, it slid further, a slow, deliberate peeling back. My throat constricted. I clutched the fabric, pulling it back, only for it to be wrenched downwards again with surprising force, an invisible tug of war. It nearly slipped from my grasp entirely. A hot flush surged through me, warring with the icy patch of air I sensed beside the bed. "Leave me alone," the words tore from my throat, raw and fractured. Silence answered. The blanket remained still, but sleep was now a scorched landscape. Days bled into weeks, each sunset layering a thicker patina of dread onto my bedroom walls. The air within felt permanently charged, expectant. Twice I sought refuge in the sterile anonymity of hotel rooms. Those nights passed undisturbed, offering a tantalizing glimpse of normalcy. But sanctuary was temporary, purchased. Returning home meant facing that familiar threshold, the twist of anxiety in my gut tightening with each step towards the bedroom door. Bedtime transformed from a desired respite into a nightly ordeal, exhaustion warring constantly with the primal fear of lying down, of inviting it back. One evening, fueled by desperation, I attempted confrontation. Lights blazing, I sat rigidly on the edge of the bed. "If you're here," I announced to the unresponsive room, voice trembling slightly. "Reveal yourself." Silence echoed. Minutes crawled. My pulse gradually steadied. Perhaps it's gone. A fragile hope flickered. Perhaps it was only ever fear. Then I extinguished the main light, leaving only the bedside lamp, and eased back against the pillows. Instantly, an immense pressure settled onto my chest, stealing my breath in shallow, frantic gasps. My body became stone, limbs locked, unresponsive to my mind's frantic commands. Panic flared, hot and suffocating. And then, the breathing, intimately close, brushing against my ear. The weight intensified, a crushing presence pinning me down, drowning me in the very air I fought to inhale. Abruptly, it lifted. I gasped, sucking in air, scrambling wildly off the mattress. In the bathroom's harsh glare, my reflection was a ghost. Pale, haunted, eyes ringed with exhaustion. The helplessness was absolute, logic a useless tool against this intangible siege. The subsequent nights fell into a grim rhythm. The telltale dip in the mattress, the spectral respiration, the sibilant murmurs just beyond comprehension. Sometimes the duvet would shift. Other times, an icy fingertip seemed to graze my shoulder, my leg, leaving gooseflesh in its wake. Each incident triggered the same visceral jolt, the same surge of adrenaline. My existence became a taut wire stretched between dusk and dawn. Sleep became the enemy. Strong coffee staved off collapse, but eventually exhaustion would claim me. And in that vulnerable state, the presence would inevitably return, a silent, chilling sentinel. I rearranged the furniture, a desperate feng shui against the unseen. It changed nothing. I slept bathed in light, lamps, flashlights, the flickering television screen. useless. The presence remained, indifferent to illumination. The urge to confide, to share this burden, warred with the paralyzing fear of dismissal, of being labeled unstable. So the secret festered, isolating me. By day I wore a mask of functionality, but beneath it my nerves frayed, making me jump at sudden noises, perpetually glancing over my shoulder. Entering my bedroom felt like stepping into a cage, the air thick with unseen eyes. Time warped, settling into a perverse nightly ritual. I'd lie awake, hyper-alert, scanning the darkness, anticipating. Sometimes the soft huff of breath near my ear would make me flinch. Sometimes a subtle pressure against my back, as if someone had shifted closer. I'd go utterly still, breath held captive, counting the frantic beats of my own heart. Minutes stretched into elastic eternities. One night, amidst the usual susurrations, a sound coalesced, chillingly familiar. My name, Eliza, breathed so faintly I couldn't be certain. Yet the possibility alone sent ice water through my veins. I gripped the duvet, knuckles white. The distinct patch of cold beside me seemed to migrate, to reposition itself. Flinging on the lamp, I stared wildly at the vacant space, the indentation on the mattress where it had been, chasing phantoms. A shiver traced my spine, the taste of fear metallic on my tongue. Dawn felt lifetimes away. Now sleep offers no escape, only transition. I dread the descent into unconsciousness almost as much as the strained vigilance of waking hours. Sometimes the paralysis returns, a leaden shroud over my limbs, silencing even the scream trapped in my throat. My mind cycles frantically through impossible solutions. There is no door to bolt against this intruder, no form to confront. It is simply there, an invisible cohabitant of my solitude. Colleagues comment on my pallor, the shadows beneath my eyes. I murmur excuses about demanding projects. Ronan and I exist in separate orbits now, leaving no confidant for this spectral haunting. My existence has become dichotomous. Functional daylight hours bleeding into nights steeped in formless terror. Each evening crossing the bedroom threshold is like willingly entering a snare. The watchers are unseen, yet their gaze is palpable. And it's no longer confined. Seeking refuge on the living room couch, I felt the cushion beside me yield. In the spare room, the familiar chilling respiration has found me. It follows. Most nights now devolve into this strained vigil. I lie rigid, anticipating, feeling the weight of its unseen gaze, the localized chill that signifies its proximity. It seems to wait, patient, for any lapse in my defenses, any softening towards sleep before making itself known. A tug on the covers, a breath against my skin. Sunrise is the only reprieve, the slow creep of light dissolving the immediate terror, though never the underlying dread. My imagination no longer offers a convenient scapegoat. This experience, however illogical, is viscerally real. It reveals no face, no form, yet its presence is unwavering, an uninvited guest sharing my most private space, leaving me brittle with fear. I brace for escalation, for some definitive confrontation. But the pattern holds. The sinking mattress, the cold air, the whispers like static on the edge of hearing, the paralyzing grip. How long can one endure this erosion? Safety feels like a forgotten language. All that remains is the certainty that when darkness falls and I surrender to bed, I am not solitary. Something is there, a palpable void, breathing softly, watching intently, anchoring me with terror. And each night, I wait. The waiting itself is a unique torture, the taut silence before the mattress shifts, before the whispers begin, before the cold settles in beside me. This is my nocturnal landscape now. Lying in the ink dark, anticipating the familiar weight, the phantom breath, the icy touch, its motives remain obscure, its nature undefined. There is only the enduring, the weathering of its presence until dawn offers its temporary amnesty. Then, the cycle resets. Trapped not just in my house, but within the confines of my own bed, tethered to an invisible haunting I can neither comprehend nor banish. Precisely when the landscape began, its subtle metamorphosis remains elusive to Elias. 6 months prior, he'd rescued it from a neighborhood yard sale, a pastoral scene destined for the vacant expanse of his hallway wall. It depicted tranquility itself, gentle swells of grassy earth, a scattering of trees, hills receding into hazy distance. A simple fence bisected the foreground, flanked by indistinct blossoms and the placid gleam of a small pond. It served its purpose, filling the void, initially seeming innocuous enough. Aged, certainly, its pigments faded beneath a patina of time, yet housed within an appealingly weathered frame, its colors muted and restful. Beyond the first week or two, Elias scarcely granted it a thought, merely a static fixture on the passage between slumber and necessity. Then, perhaps a month ago, a routine morning transit past it snagged his attention. He halted. The copse of trees anchoring the left edge felt altered. Hadn't they nestled closer to the fence line before? Now a distinct interval separated them. He tried summoning the original composition to mind, a futile exercise in memory's haze. Perhaps the network of fine craquelure spiderwebbing the canvas, catching the ambient light just so, created an optical illusion. He dismissed the flicker of unease, proceeding with his day. Days bled into one another before another discrepancy arrested him. The heavens depicted within the frame seemed bruised, the clouds gathering weight, morphing from benign wisps of cerulean into brooding stormheads. Elias recalled no such tempestuousness, only a sky of soft, amiable blues. He leaned closer, scrutinizing the textured impasto, the visible pathways of the brushstrokes forming the rough, uneven clouds. His fingertip tapped the frame, solid, time-worn wood. The canvas itself offered no clue. Nothing stirred under his gaze. He reprimanded himself. Surely his mind, burdened with trivialities, was merely inventing significance, finally registering details long dormant. Yet, the following week witnessed Elias pausing with increasing frequency before the pastoral scene. Each examination unearthed fresh disquiet. The grass, one day cropped short, seemed wildly overgrown the next. The faint floral shapes shifted hue unpredictably. A section of the fence appeared splintered, then strangely whole again. A knot tightened in his stomach with every perceived inconsistency, his breath catching, a faint pressure building in his chest. He'd rake a hand through his hair, blink, refocus. The scene remained stubbornly inert whenever observed directly, a silent, still tableau. But the cumulative weight of these minute deviations pressed upon him. His throat would constrict as he passed. Avoidance became a conscious effort, difficult in the narrow corridor connecting his essential spaces. One dawn delivered a jolt that slicked his palms with sweat. A tenebrous shape lurked now within the tree line, where none had existed before. Amorphous, vaguely anthropomorphic, like a figure observing from the shadow depths behind the timber. Elias pressed nearer, eyes narrowed, breath held captive. It resembled a smear of darker pigment, lacking discernible features or attire, merely an unsettling suggestion of presence among the trunks. A chill traced paths down his arms. He tried to rationalize. An oversight, surely. Yet deep within, a certainty resonated. He had studied those trees intently, repeatedly. He would have perceived a figure. In the ensuing nights, Elias found himself lingering in the unlit hallway, the painting a rectangle of deeper black against the gloom. His hand hovered near the light switch, a reluctance to confront it in darkness blooming within him. A ridiculous fear, he chided himself, unnerved by mere art. Still, tension coiled in his shoulders. He flicked the switch. The scene sprang into view, deceptively normal until his gaze locked onto the figure. It had advanced, undeniably closer to the tree line's edge. Its form gained a fraction more definition, tall perhaps with elongated limbs. Features remained elusive, lost in shadow. A queasy churning began low in his gut. He retreated abruptly to his bedroom, closing the door, listening intently to the ensuing silence. The transformations persisted, relentlessly. Daily the figure encroached further into the foreground. The painted sky deepened towards perpetual twilight. Trees contorted into unnatural angles. The fence disintegrated piece by piece. The grass bore the imprint of trampling. The flowers wilted into decay. Elias grasped for logical anchors. Perhaps the painting always held this grim detail, his perception merely sharpening. Maybe the hallway's illumination shifted subtly with the changing seasons. Were his own eyes betraying him? He fought to dismiss the mounting dread, but nocturnal hours brought new terrors. Soft clicks, like wood settling or contracting, emanated from the wall. Then came faint susurrations, brief, quiet sighs originating unmistakably from the painting's direction. He'd stand frozen in the passage, straining to capture the ephemeral sounds. They were real, however faint. The fine hairs on his neck prickled. Reaching out, his fingers brushed the frame. It felt cool, unnaturally so. Pressing his ear close, he detected a soft, grating creak, reminiscent of paint scraping against a hidden surface. His throat felt impossibly tight. He snapped the lights back on, examining the canvas minutely. It appeared unchanged from moments before, yet the figure now stood poised almost at the fence line. Its silhouette was stark enough to reveal dark, hollow depressions where eyes might reside. Its head canted slightly, as if observing something just beyond the frame, as if observing him. Elias recoiled, heart hammering against his ribs, and fled to the relative sanctuary of the living room sofa, struggling to regain composure. The following day solidified his resolve. The painting had to go. Grasping the frame's upper edge, Elias attempted to lift it from its nail. It refused to yield. He pulled harder, encountering unexpected resistance, as if the wood had fused itself to the plaster. He checked the back, hung conventionally yet now immovable. He strained, pushed, pulled. The frame groaned in protest. Beneath the surface, the painted image seemed to ripple, yet the object remained fixed. Resorting to a flathead screwdriver, he tried prying it loose, succeeding only in chipping the wall. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his jaw clenched tight. One final desperate heave, leveraging his full weight, the frame emitted a tortured creak but held fast. Muscles screaming, breath ragged, he conceded defeat for now. That night, plunging the hallway into darkness, Elias listened, body utterly still. A delicate tapping emerged, like something rapping gently from within the frame. It was followed by a soft, viscous sound, unsettlingly moist, like something sliding across a surface. His hand shot to the switch. Light flooded the corridor. The painting's surface glistened, slick as if freshly varnished. He leaned in. The figure stood directly behind the fence now, its presence warping the painted wood, splintering the boards. Its form seemed taller, leaner than before, The sky above was nearly obsidian. The grass lay flattened, violated. Bringing his face inches away, Elias perceived minute beads of moisture clinging to the painted fence. He touched the surface, expecting the hard smoothness of aged canvas or glass. Instead, his fingertip met a damp, yielding texture. It recoiled, slick with something that smelled acridly of old pigment. Nausea surged, and he snatched his hand back as if burned, wiping it frantically on his jeans before stumbling into his bedroom, locking the door firmly behind him. Sleep offered little respite. Twice he woke, convinced he heard footsteps pacing the hallway. Edging to the door, he listened. A faint crackling sound drifted from beyond. He flung the door open, simultaneously hitting the light switch. Stillness reigned. The painting hung as he'd last seen it, the figure staring blankly ahead from its twin pits of darkness. He retreated, leaving his bedroom light burning. Sitting rigidly on the edge of his bed, tension a physical presence until the first gray hints of dawn filtered through the window. Morning brought attempts to enlist aid. A call to a friend yielded only excuses of busyness. Another friend's phone rang unanswered. Elias stood before the painting again, arms crossed, staring defiance he didn't feel. The scene had deteriorated further. Darkness consumed almost the entirety of the landscape. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes. The fence was a ruin. Patches of bare earth marred the grass. The figure dominated the foreground now, its painted hands seemingly gripping a fence post. Knuckles rendered as dark, crude lumps. Its head angled downwards, conveying an impression of immense pressure, as if pushing against the very fabric of the scene. He tapped the surface again. A faint, hollow resonance answered. Fetching a damp cloth, he tried scrubbing the frame, hoping to loosen its grip. The wood felt rough, abrasive, snagging the fabric, leaving minute splinters embedded in his palm. A sharp sting, small scratches welling tiny beads of blood. He pressed his lips into a thin line, battling rising panic. A new strategy. The hammer from the garage. He tapped the frame tentatively, searching for weakness. Solid. He struck harder, the hammer rebounded slightly, leaving no mark. He aimed for the surface itself. A dull thud, no crack, no fracture. Again, harder. Nothing. His arm trembled with exertion and fear. With renewed force, he struck the frame's corner. The impact was absorbed with a deadened sound. The painting remained utterly indifferent. Breathing grew rapid, his chest aching. Defeated, he sagged against the opposite wall, hammer dangling limply from his grip. The thought of abandoning the house, simply walking away, surfaced with potent allure. But his life resided within these walls. He stood paralyzed, clutching the tool, mouth parched, mind racing. That night, every light in the house blazed. Hallway, bathroom, kitchen, an island of artificial daylight against the encroaching dread. From a chair in the living room offering an oblique view, Elias watched. The figure seemed to strain forward, pressing against the painting's inner surface, causing the canvas to visibly bulge. He rose, approaching with slow, deliberate steps, his sneakers squeaking on the floorboards. A tremor ran through his legs, his hand unsteady. Reaching out, he touched the surface. It felt yielding, gelatinous. He snatched his finger back, heart galloping. A faint chemical tang hung in the air, the unmistakable odor of wet paint. He coughed, stumbling backward, colliding with a small end table. A click overhead. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. His gaze snapped back to the painting. The figure pressed its dark mass against the inner boundary. He could see the painted fence posts bowing under the strain. An arm pushed forward, stretching the pigment outwards like dark, viscous membrane. A wet, sucking noise accompanied the movement. Elias's throat closed, muscles locking. He retreated further, sweat tracing cold paths down his neck. Flight screamed through his nerves, but his limbs felt leaden, unresponsive. He needed air, escape, however temporary. He reached the front door, fumbled it open, and stepped onto the porch, pulling the door shut, the lock clicking behind him. The cool night air was a balm. Though the cloying scent of paint clung stubbornly to his clothes, he wiped his face, feeling lightheaded, and simply stood there for what felt like an hour, waiting, trying to wrestle his panic into submission, trying not to replay the impossible image. Eventually, the realization dawned. He had nowhere else to go. This was home. He had to go back inside. Re-entering the house, he immediately heard it. A soft scraping sound from the hallway, like heavy fabric dragging across wood. Turning the corner, he saw the painting askew, no longer flush with the wall, its bottom edge jutting outwards. He approached cautiously. The surface looked distorted, warped like heat-melted plastic. The figure within, it was halfway out. A dark, cohesive shape was extruding itself, head and shoulders pushing through the ruptured canvas. Thin runnels of black fluid dripped from the emerging form onto the floorboards below, releasing the pungent aroma of turpentine. Elias froze, breath caught. A low, ragged, wheezing sound filled the silence. The figure's head shifted minutely. Featureless, a mere silhouette punctuated by unsettling lumps and hollows. Its shoulders were broad, asymmetrical. It seemed clad in darkness itself. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping. He slapped the light switch repeatedly. Off, on, off, on. The bulb flickered erratically but remained lit. The figure slid further, an arm emerging now, bent at an impossible angle, fingers dripping the dark ichor onto the floor. The corridor reeked, the fumes stinging his eyes, making him cough into his hand. He backed away until the wall stopped him. He gripped the hammer, still in his hand, but it shook uncontrollably. He took a hesitant step forward, raising the tool, but the emergence continued, accompanied by soft, sickening cracking sounds as it pulled itself free from its two-dimensional prison. It was too much. Elias bolted into the living room, snatched a throw blanket from the sofa, and rushed back, flinging it over the grotesque tableau. The fabric slid off immediately, pooling on the floor. He averted his eyes, but the wet, squelching sounds of its movement were unavoidable. He retreated towards his bedroom, the entity now positioned between him and the only other exit. Backing into his room, eyes fixed on the hallway threshold, he pulled the door almost shut, but left it unlatched, refusing to corner himself. He stood just inside, breath tearing through his lungs, listening. Silence descended upon the hallway. Then, after minutes that stretched into eternity, a soft rustling, the faint creak of a floorboard under unnatural weight. His heart hammered violently. His legs felt like water. The urge to flee, to burst out the front door, warred with the terrifying reality of the passage required. He waited, listening. The pervasive smell of paint seeped under the door, thick and dizzying. He had to get out. Keys, wallet, snatched from the nightstand. A deep, steadying breath. Then he pulled the door open. The hallway seemed dimmer, the light fixture sputtering weakly. The painting was empty. The frame hung twisted, violated. The canvas within was a dark, weeping void. The figure was gone. A scraping sound echoed from the living room. Elias didn't hesitate, didn't look. He sprinted forward, down the hallway towards the front door, sneakers skidding slightly on unseen dampness. His breathing was a frantic, shallow gasp. Reaching the door, he wrenched it open, stumbled outside, and slammed it shut behind him. He stood on the porch, gasping, staring back at the closed door. The night air felt sharp, cold. From within the house came a muffled thud, like heavy furniture being displaced. He didn't know what else to do. Descending the steps, he fumbled his way to the car parked in the driveway. He slid inside, turned the key, the engine catching immediately. He glanced back at the house. Lights still burned in the windows. No movement visible. He sat there, engine idling, breath still ragged, the chill of drying sweat on his skin. He didn't know what that thing was, or what it wanted, but returning tonight was unthinkable. Shifting into reverse, hands trembling on the wheel, Elias backed out of the driveway and drove away. The phantom scent of paint clinging to him, his fingertips still feeling faintly sticky. He had no intention of going back anytime soon. Deep woods possess a singular hush, not tranquility, not the peaceable calm one might anticipate, but an expectant void, a world inhaling before a scream. That particular stillness saturated the night my familiar world fractured. Solitude camping was my ritual, my communion. Yet this venture felt aberrant from its inception. I'd sought out the forest's untrammeled heart, miles from any marked path. A cartographer's oversight. Just myself, the ancient arboreal sentinels, the indifferent scatter of stars. The precise, undiluted isolation I craved. Late summer lingered. Days held a residual warmth while nights whispered of coming frost. Beside a dense cathedral of pines in a small clearing that felt excised from time, I erected my fragile shelter. No signal bars reached here, no digital tethers, an unplugged perfection. The first day unfolded predictably. Foraging for tinder and downed branches, securing my temporary home against the elements, tracing game trails that wound into deeper shadow. As dusk began to bleed across the sky, staining the clouds, a modest fire crackled, its smoke a fragrant braid mingling with the resinous perfume of the pines. When the sun finally relinquished its hold, shadows elongated into grasping, mutable things, and the woods donned a heavier, more profound mystery. Only as my fire subsided, collapsing into a pulsing heart of embers, did I truly perceive it. The silence. Not merely an absence of sound, but a presence in itself. A thick, weighted quietude, as if the very air had solidified, damping all vibration. No susurrus of leaves in a phantom breeze, no thrum of late-season insects, no distant cry of night hunters. Utter nullity. The world beyond my small circle of firelight felt vacuum-sealed in darkness. A tremor, cold and unwelcome, traced the length of my spine. Dismissible, I insisted inwardly, the wilderness amplifying solitude's echo, turning introspection towards unease. My history in these wilds, extensive and solitary, held no precedent for fear. Yet this specific hush felt invasive, prickling my skin like static. I stirred the embers, coaxing brief, frantic flares that momentarily illuminated the surrounding trees. They seemed to lean closer in the flickering light, their boughs weaving intricate, dancing darkness against the deeper black. The sensation of unseen eyes intensified, a primal awareness tightening the muscles in my neck. Ridiculous, I chided myself, shaking my head against the encroaching paranoia. Just the forest, breathing its ancient, indifferent rhythm. But the unease clung, a burr beneath the skin. My gaze kept darting involuntarily to the periphery, seeking definition in the ink-black spaces between the massive trunks. Retreating into the nylon shell of the tent offered scant comfort. Outside, the air grew sharp, the silence achieving a depth that felt absolute. Zipping the flap felt less like securing shelter and more like sealing a tomb. Sleep remained elusive, a skittish bird startled by every internal beat of my heart. Each time I allowed my eyes to close, phantoms coalesced just beyond the thin fabric, patient, waiting. Hours might have passed in this liminal state before oblivion finally claimed me, only for a noise, something distinct, moving, to rip me violently back to awareness. I bolted upright, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. A breathless pause followed, straining to parse reality from dream residue. The woods remained unnervingly mute, the silence itself a roar in my ears. Then, again, a faint shuffling, the unmistakable drag of something slow through the dry leaf litter at the camp's edge. My flashlight trembled in my grasp as I fumbled for the switch, its beam a nervous slash against the tent wall. My own pulse thundered, a frantic drumbeat against the profound quiet. There. Again. A slow, methodical rustle culminating in the unmistakable scrape of something brushing against the taut fabric of the tent, mere inches from where I sat frozen. My breath hitched. This was no foraging creature, no random nocturnal passage of some woodland beast. The movement felt aware, calculated, as if its source understood precisely my location, my vulnerability. Steeling myself, summoning a courage I scarcely felt, I eased the zipper down a fraction. A sliver of cold night air invaded the close space. The embers were long dead. Utter blackness reigned outside. My light's cone swept across the sentinel trees, revealing nothing but bark and shadow. Emptiness. Stillness. Yet the presence lingered, palpable, a weight just beyond the light's throw, observing. For an age, it felt, I remained poised there, half emerged from the tent's opening, the flashlight beam cleaving the dark, hunting for motion within the static shadows. But the sounds ceased. The forest held its breath once more, returning to its unnerving equilibrium. Gradually, the acute conviction of being watched waned, eroded by exhaustion's rationale. A falling branch, perhaps? A nocturnal scavenger disturbed by my presence? Plausible deniability offered a fragile shield. I retreated fully, zipped the fragile barrier shut. Sleep, however, was now a shattered mirror. Every fragment reflected fear. Every sigh of wind through the needles, every distant creak of wood settling, became a potential harbinger, a renewed threat. I lay rigid in the suffocating dark, listening intently to the immense silence, anticipating the next violation. Dawn eventually filtered through the dense canopy, dappling the tent's interior with pale, uncertain gold. The air held a crisp, clean promise. Outside, the scene appeared utterly undisturbed, almost mocking my nocturnal terror. Foolish, I thought, emerging and stretching stiff muscles amidst the familiar setup. The fire pit's cold gray ash, the small cookpot, my backpack leaning companionably against a moss-covered log. Then my gaze fell upon the damp earth near the tent. Footprints, indelible though softened slightly by the morning dew, leading directly from the tree line's deepest shadow to the very wall of my nylon sanctuary. Not animal spoor. These were too long, the stride too measured. Disturbingly, unnervingly humanoid. Ice water seemed to flood my veins. Crouching, I followed their path visually. They circumscribed the tent completely. A deliberate, unnerving circuit, before vanishing back into the dense woods from whence they came, leaving no trace beyond the disturbed earth. Someone, something, had stood sentinel over my sleep. My mind spun, frantic and disjointed. Who could it have been? No other camps existed for miles. No trails nearby warranted such a nocturnal detour into this wilderness pocket. And the silence, why not announce oneself? Why only watch? A suffocating, visceral dread descended as I crammed gear haphazardly into my pack, fingers clumsy with haste. This sanctuary had become a trap. I would not endure another night under that unseen, unknown gaze. The trek back transformed the woods. Trees that only yesterday had offered solace now seemed accusatory, their elongated morning shadows like skeletal fingers reaching across the path. Each snapped twig underfoot, each rustle of unseen life in the undergrowth, was a jolt to my frayed nerves. Vulnerability was a tangible shroud. I felt tracked, pursued by the silence itself. Reaching the car parked on the overgrown logging trace was like breaching the surface after near drowning. I hurled the pack into the back, slammed the door, the engine roaring to life with reassuring potency, spitting gravel as I spun the wheels. One final instinctual glance towards the trailhead in the rearview mirror. And I saw it. A silhouette, liminal against the tangled green gloom at the forest's absolute edge. Tall, unnaturally slender, its features lost to shadow and distance. Motionless, silent. An effigy of pure, unwavering observation. I didn't hesitate. The accelerator met the floor. The rough dirt road blurred. Miles dissolved behind me until asphalt and the mundane architecture of distant civilization offered a fragile, inadequate buffer. What entity occupied those woods? What inscrutable purpose fueled its silent nocturnal vigil remains an agonizing unanswered question etched into my memory. I have never returned. The lure of the wild, once a siren song, is now muted, overwritten by a chilling, persistent echo. Whenever the thought of deep wood solitude arises, the certainty surfaces like cold dread. Somewhere within that vast, indifferent green, something waits and watches. The exact moment resides sharp in memory, etched by the late-hour solitude and the screen's cold glow. I was Elias Vance, trawling through the day's captures, pixels blurring under tired eyes. Then, a flicker in the periphery of a shot, a faint form lodged in the corner's gloom. It resolved into something like a woman draped in white, static in the background, a stray tourist perhaps missed in the focus of creation. Yet her stance snagged my attention. She faced the lens. Faced me. A peculiar wrongness tightened my gut, that primal awareness of being singled out in a crowd. My trade is capturing ghosts of stone and timber, freelance architectural photography. It lures me to the husks of the past, ancient townships, decaying cathedrals, abandoned cloisters, anywhere history whispers through crumbling mortar. I'm not easily unnerved. The profession demands a certain comfort with echoing corridors, bolted gates, and the solitary rhythm of my own tread in desolate places. But that night, leaning closer, coaxing detail from the digital grain, a visceral certainty clicked into place. Her face remained obscured, a pale smudge, yet I felt the weight of her gaze pierce the monitor. I flinched, scrolling onward, dismissing it. Minutes dissolved. Another image, same edifice, different angle. She reappeared. Now hugging the frame's far left, a silhouette of shoulder and dark hair against weathered stone. Impossible. The shots were consecutive. No one had drifted through my field of vision. Dawn found me retracing my steps to the old convent, its high walls enclosing a courtyard worn smooth by time. Midday light, I'd reasoned, would yield better textures. The air hung still, heavy with silence. Tripod deployed, I began framing the sequence of arches lining one side. Dust motes danced in stray sunbeams, stirred by a fitful breeze, the only movement. Yet a low pressure persisted in my chest, an uninvited tension coiling without cause. Ignore it. Focus. Hours later, back in my apartment's sterile light, I processed a new batch. Initially, nothing. Then, near the set's conclusion, she materialized again. Monitor glare reflected in my wide eyes. Behind a pillar, distinct. My breath hitched. I rubbed my temples, looked again. This transcended coincidence, undeniably present, same white gown. And closer now, perceptibly so, as if she'd measured a few paces toward my position while my back was turned. Sweat prickled my palms. My heart hammered a frantic beat against my ribs. Rationalizations flickered, a local eccentric, a groundskeeper unseen, but they felt hollow. My process is meticulous. Stray figures register. I hadn't seen her, not with my own eyes. A bizarre anomaly, I told myself. Surely I was overlooking some mundane explanation. Sleep offered little refuge that night. My mind snagged on those images. A decision formed in the restless dark. A systematic review. Every recent shoot, image by image. Perhaps a lens flare, a digital ghost, some logical flaw would surface. Morning came. Editing software loaded, I began the excavation. 6 photographs across multiple sessions held her imprint. Each time a different posture, a new location within the frame. Sometimes half concealed, sometimes starkly present, but always incrementally nearer to where my tripod had stood. Details sharpened. The dress seemed archaic, loose-sleeved, ankle-length. Her hair a dark cascade. The face remained elusive, a frustrating blur. The following days blurred into a sequence of assignments in nearby villages. An antiquated library, its air thick with the scent of decaying paper. A diminutive church, light fractured through stained glass. A constant twitchy vigilance became my shadow. I scanned thresholds, peered into alcoves, the periphery of my vision perpetually suspect. Focusing proved difficult, my concentration fractured by the hunt for a white dress in the corners of my eyes. A muscle clenched tight in my mind, refusing to yield. No one approached, no suspicious figures haunted the actual locations. Yet each evening the ritual repeated. Upload, process, discover. There she'd be, leaning against a far wall, poised behind a row of empty pews. Once, chillingly, halfway up a narrow staircase, seeming to gaze down toward the space I had occupied moments before. Ice traced a path down my spine. I could almost feel the stillness of her breath. My apartment door acquired new significance. The deadbolt turned with deliberate clicks. Peeking through the peephole before venturing out felt less foolish with each passing day. My own footsteps in the hallway seemed alien, suspect. Isolation felt safer. Explaining this, apparition felt impossible. Who would believe it? The sheer illogic defied articulation, the same woman, the same dress, stalking my lens across disparate locations where she had no earthly business being. One commission led me to a weathered fortress crowning a hill outside the city, girdled by a dry moat and formidable stone ramparts. Late afternoon sun, I hoped, would sculpt its textures perfectly. I forced myself into the familiar rhythm, framing the outer walls, the immense gate, the desolate courtyard within. A scattering of tourists milled distantly, absorbed in their own snapshots. Then, a sudden wave of profound unease washed over me, tightening my shoulders. A faint noise, gravel crunching underfoot. I whirled around, pulse leaping. Empty air, the wind perhaps. A shaky breath escaped me. Work resumed. Hours later, packing my gear, a chill clung to my hands on the steering wheel. My legs felt braced, anticipating a blow that never landed. Back in the sanctuary of my flat, the door bolted, keys tossed aside. I slumped before the computer. A weary dread settled in. Get it over with. See the inevitable. The import began. Shot after shot, blessedly normal. 30 frames. A fragile seedling of relief sprouted. Maybe, just maybe. Image 31. My stomach lurched. There. near a shadowed doorway set into the thick wall, half obscured but crisply defined. The subsequent photos tracked her across the courtyard, behind a broad archway. The final frame of the sequence stopped my breath. She stood almost centrally, still yards away, but undeniably, terrifyingly closer. A vice clamped around my chest. Air rasped in my throat. My fingers trembled on the mouse. Quitting, changing specialties. The thoughts swirled, desperate and useless. This was my life, my craft. How could anyone orchestrate such a pervasive, silent haunting across locked gates and guarded ruins? Days bled into a self-imposed confinement. I prowled my apartment, scouring the internet's obscure corners for whispers of a white-clad wanderer haunting historic sites. Nothing. Vague inquiries on local forums. Anyone seen a woman in white near old buildings? Yielded only silence or confused replies. Finally, restlessness and dwindling funds forced my hand. A local historical society needed interiors of the town's old bell tower. The money was essential. And perhaps, a desperate thought surfaced. Perhaps seeing her manifest there, in person, would break the spell. Confrontation, understanding, anything but this silent photographic pursuit. The tower loomed, roughly 90 feet of stone and history. Inside, the air hung thick with damp chill and the metallic tang of rust. Narrow stairs spiraled upwards into shadow. My footfalls boomed unnaturally in the enclosed space. Pigeons rustled unseen in the heights. Near the base, aiming up the winding ascent towards the bell chamber, I set up. The shutter's click echoed sharply. Flash-illuminated stone worn smooth by centuries. After capturing the initial perspectives, I climbed, pausing on each landing. More shots, the texture of the walls, the deep-set windows, dust and decay tickled my throat. Between the second and third landings, a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature. Cold air brushed my skin. I froze, straining my ears against the silence. A prickle of static electricity danced across my scalp. Then, faint, distinct, a footstep from above. A soft tap on stone. My heart vaulted into my throat. Flashlight beam stabbed upwards, trembling. Nothing visible but a fleeting impression of movement, a white flicker vanishing around the stairwell's curve. Adrenaline surged, leaving my legs weak. Retreat screamed, but I forced myself upward, step by measured step. Muscles bunched, breath shallow. The higher I climbed, the deeper the gloom felt, punctuated only by narrow slits in the stone. My light jittered. Reaching the summit, the massive rust-pocked bell hung overhead. The floor, rough-hewn stone. Limited hiding places, behind stout wooden beams, amidst piles of debris. I swept the beam across every shadow. Cobwebs, dead leaves, emptiness. Silence pressed in. Sweat slicked my back. Minutes passed, marked only by my own ragged pulse. Then the descent, legs shaky. I finished the job mechanically, wide shots on each landing, rushing now, desperate for the open air. Home. The ritual again, mouth dry, shirt clinging, clicking through the images, dread mounting. Then one frame, captured near the tower's apex. Her face. She was behind. The camera's perspective somehow. Half her visage peered from behind a structural beam, gaze fixed directly on the lens. Close, impossibly close, mere feet away. The flash rendered her skin unnaturally pale, her eyes dark, fathomless pits. A strangled gasp escaped me. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. I hadn't seen her. I was alone up there. Yet the photograph screamed otherwise. My body locked, rigid with terror. That night became a siege. Food held no appeal. Water, pacing, endless replays of the tower, the photograph. Nerves frayed to snapping point. Every reflective surface became a potential portal. I flinched from mirrors. The television droned, a bulwark against silence. Exhaustion eventually claimed me on the couch, dragging me into fitful dreams of echoing footsteps on stone stairs. Morning found me hollowed out. A hiatus from shooting, that much was clear. Editing backlog offered a necessary distraction, but even that felt tainted. Opening client files, my eyes instinctively scanned the backgrounds, hunting for a whisper of white. Each time, a jolt of adrenaline, a hitched breath. The pattern haunted me. Closer, always closer. What happened when the distance reached zero? The thought alone provoked a cold sweat. Would she step out of the frame? Would she speak? Was it warning or summons? Mid-afternoon, the doorbell shrieked. I levitated off the couch, coffee nearly spilling, heart hammering. I crept to the door, peered through the fisheye lens. A delivery driver, oblivious. I cracked the door, mumbled thanks, secured the locks again, trembling. Simple human interaction felt like a physical blow. Later, I arranged the cursed images chronologically on screen. The progression was undeniable. From a barely discernible speck in the distance to the near visage in the bell tower. Each photograph a measured step forward. Sometimes obscured, sometimes blatant, but always advancing. Those eyes in the final shot, not angry, not sorrowful, just intent. Studying me, my throat constricted. Deleting them felt like destroying evidence, but also like inviting oblivion. Smashing the hard drive seemed drastic, suicidal to my career. Instead, a compromise. Backups made, secreted away in a drawer. Proof, perhaps, that I wasn't merely unraveling. The subsequent days were an exercise in forced normalcy. Groceries, editing. A brief camera-less walk, my senses hyper-alert. Every passerby scrutinized, clothes, face, gait. No woman in white materialized on the mundane streets. Yet the knot of tension in my shoulders remained, a permanent resident. Yesterday, a call. A potential client, a restored manor house, good pay, weeks away. I stalled, mumbling about needing time. Hanging up, I sank onto the couch, staring at the indifferent wall, a dull ache spreading through my chest. There's no map for this territory. Continue shooting, invite her closer. Stop, starve. Who was she? What did this relentless, silent approach signify? I only knew she was out there, tethered to my lens, drawing nearer with every frame. She never speaks, never makes a sound I can pinpoint. But she watches. I see her in the pixels, feel her in the desolate places. I don't know what happens when she finally reaches the focal plane, when the space between us collapses entirely. I don't know what I'll see when she's close enough to touch. And that uncertainty, that final impending frame, is the most terrifying thing of all.